My name is Clara Bennett, and I was 36 years old when my mother told me to step away from the dessert table because the family should be served before the help starts eating. She said it with a smile, almost tenderly, in front of 58 guests gathered beneath chandeliers I had paid to light. My sister Vanessa stood beside her in a silver dress, holding a glass of champagne from the package she had insisted we upgrade, and she did not correct her. She only gave me the tiny, satisfied look she had worn since we were children, the look that said she knew exactly where I belonged. I remember the dessert fork in my hand. I remember the silence around us, soft and embarrassed, the kind of silence people use when they want cruelty to pass without becoming responsible for it. I remember looking at the lemon torte, at the white roses, at the framed photographs of my parents' 35th wedding anniversary, and realizing there was not one thing in that room that existed without me. Then I put the fork down, walked into the hotel corridor, and made one phone call. I never raised my voice. I never exposed anyone with a speech. I simply stopped paying. By the end of the night, my family understood what my silence had been worth, because for the first time, they received the invoice. The request had arrived 6 weeks earlier on a Wednesday morning, while I was reconciling payroll for a dental practice. My mother, Elaine, called during business hours because she had never considered my work real enough to interrupt politely. "Clara, darling," she began, in the tone she used when she was about to turn my competence into an obligation. "Your father and I have decided we should celebrate properly this year. 35 years deserves something elegant. You always know how to make things happen." That last sentence had governed most of my adult life. You always know how to make things happen. It sounded like admiration until you noticed it was never followed by, "How can we help?" Or, "What will it cost you?" My parents did not ask me to organize things. They announced what they wanted and trusted that the machinery called Clara would begin moving. I owned a small payroll and compliance consultancy in a second-floor office above a florist. I spent my days catching mistakes before they became penalties, finding the missing numbers, and making sure other people's employees were paid on time. I liked work that could be verified. A tax form did not pout when corrected. A balance sheet did not accuse you of selfishness for noticing that it was wrong. At the end of the day, the figures either matched or they did not. My family, however, had survived for decades on figures no one was permitted to examine. When my father needed emergency dental work, I covered the portion insurance did not. When my mother wanted to attend her cousin's destination wedding but claimed the flights were outrageous, I booked them. When Vanessa's marriage ended and she moved into a townhouse she could not yet afford, I paid her deposit because the children needed stability. When my nephew's soccer team traveled out of state, my card somehow secured 3 hotel rooms. When Christmas dinner became too stressful for my mother, I hosted it, bought everything, cooked everything, and listened while she thanked Vanessa for bringing the family together because Vanessa had arranged the candles. I had been called dependable so often that I mistook it for being loved. Dependable was not a compliment in our family. It was a job title with no salary, no leave, and no right to resign. My sister Vanessa was 40, 4 years older than me, and beautiful in the polished way that required constant maintenance and an audience. She ran a lifestyle page online where she posted cream-colored kitchens, handwritten gratitude lists, and photographs of family gatherings cropped carefully enough to remove anyone carrying trash bags in the background. She understood presentation. I understood infrastructure. She made people believe a life was effortless. I made sure the electricity stayed on. When I was 10, our grandmother had given each of us a small silver charm bracelet for Christmas. Mine had a tiny book charm because I loved reading. Vanessa's had a heart. 2 days later, Vanessa lost hers at the skating rink and cried for hours. My mother sat me down at the kitchen table and said, "You're the sensible one. You understand that your sister feels things more deeply." Then she unclasped my bracelet from my wrist and gave it to Vanessa. "We'll replace yours later," she promised. It was never replaced. For years afterward, I watched my sister wear my book charm beside her heart charm and accept compliments about how perfectly the bracelet suited her. That was the first time I understood my role. Vanessa's pain was an emergency. Mine was evidence that I should become more mature. So when my mother asked me to plan the anniversary celebration, I agreed, Biff. Or my own body had time to object. I opened a spreadsheet, created tabs for venue, guest list, catering, transportation, flowers, music, and contingencies, and told myself that this would be different because 35 years was important. I told myself I was giving my parents a memory. I did not admit that I was also trying, once again, to purchase a moment in which someone would finally say, "Clara did this. Clara matters." The first venue Vanessa suggested was a country club where she had once attended a charity brunch. It was unavailable. The second was a renovated warehouse that looked impressive online, but had concrete floors my father's knees could not handle. I found the Bellwether Hotel, an old stone building near the river with a private room called the conservatory. It had arched windows, brass sconces, a small terrace, and a long walnut table that could seat the immediate family. The hotel's event director, Julian Mercer, spoke in clear sentences and sent itemized proposals. I liked him immediately. The deposit was larger than I had planned, but the room was beautiful, and my father had once said he wished he could take my mother somewhere, like the old movies. I paid it from my business reserve and promised myself I would move the money back after a strong quarter. At our first planning lunch, Vanessa arrived 30 minutes late with her daughter Sophie and spent the first 10 minutes photographing her drink. Sophie was 13, observant, and careful in a way that children become careful when one parent's moods fill too much of the house. She sat across from me and quietly folded her paper napkin into smaller and smaller squares, while Vanessa scrolled through photographs of floral installations. "We need drama," Vanessa said. "Not funeral flowers, something elevated." "The room already has character," I replied, "and Mom likes white roses." "White roses are predictable." She has carried white roses every anniversary since their 10th. Vanessa waved that away. "That's exactly why we should update it." The lunch went that way. I brought the budget. Vanessa brought adjectives. Luxe, editorial, memorable, photogenic. Every adjective increased the cost. She wanted a champagne wall, custom menus, a string quartet during cocktails, a photographer, and a floral arch large enough to frame the head table. When I pointed out that our parents had asked for an intimate dinner, she said, "They don't know what they want until they see it." Then she turned her phone toward me. She had already created an event page titled, "Elaine and Robert, 35 Years of Love," with her own name listed beneath as host. The cover image was a photograph of our parents standing behind Vanessa at her wedding. I was visible only as half a shoulder near the edge. "I thought people could follow the planning," she said. "It creates anticipation." Sophie looked from the screen to me. She saw my name nowhere. Children notice absences adults pretend are design choices. That's useful, I said, because peacekeeping had become so automatic I could perform it while bleeding. Vanessa smiled. I knew you'd understand. I paid for lunch after she left early for an appointment. That night, I opened the event page. Vanessa had posted, so excited to create something unforgettable for the two people who taught me what love looks like. Comments had already begun. You are such a devoted daughter. No one celebrates family like you. Your parents must be so proud. I read them longer than I should have. Then I opened my spreadsheet and entered the lunch under miscellaneous expenses. The guest list became the first real fracture. My parents had given me 32 names, siblings, cousins, old neighbors, two couples from church, and my father's retired business partner. Vanessa added 26 more. Some were her friends. Some were local business owners she wanted to impress. Two were women she barely knew but who had large online followings. This isn't a brand event, I said carefully. No, it's a celebration, she replied. And celebrations feel sad when the room looks empty. The room won't be empty. You're thinking like an accountant. I am an accountant. You know what I mean. I did know. She meant I was thinking about reality. My mother sided with Vanessa before I finished explaining the capacity. Your sister has a gift for bringing people together, she said. Don't make everything so rigid, Clara. Rigid was another word my family used when they wanted the benefit of planning without the inconvenience of limits. The larger guest list required a different catering tier, additional servers, and the use of the adjacent terrace. I approved the changes. Then Vanessa requested heaters for the terrace, even though the forecast was mild. She wanted ivory wraps placed over the chairs in case women became cold. She wanted personalized favors. Each change was small enough to defend and large enough tea. Oh, accumulate. Julian called me after receiving the fourth revision in 2 days. Ms. Bennett, he said, I want to confirm that all additions are authorized by you. We have received requests from another family member, but you are the contracting party. I closed my office door. Yes, send everything through me. Of course. And just so there is no confusion, the card we have belongs to you. The final balance will be processed after the event unless you direct us to another arrangement before service concludes. I thanked him and wrote the sentence down in the margin of my notes without knowing why. The card belongs to you. It was such a simple fact, but facts had always been dangerous in my family. Facts introduced proportion. Facts revealed who gave, who took, who apologized, who paid, who was forgiven, and who was expected to absorb the difference. A week later, my father's sister, Aunt Marion, called. She was 78 and recovering from hip surgery. She wanted to come but worried about the terrace steps and the distance to the restrooms. I promised her a chair near the interior doors and a clear walking path. When I added a small accessible table near the windows for Marion and 3 older guests, Vanessa objected. That's where the photographer will get the best angle of Mom and Dad, she said during the venue walkthrough. The main table is 10 feet away. The light is better here. Aunt Marion can't navigate around the musicians. She can sit near the service station. The service station is noisy. Vanessa lowered her voice, as though explaining etiquette to someone inexperienced. Clara, the central people need the central table. Aunt Marion is Dad's sister. You know what I mean. Again, I did. Central did not mean beloved. It meant visually useful. Julian stood several feet away, reviewing linens with an assistant. I saw him glance toward us and then look back down. Hospitality professionals know more about families than therapists. They witness who interrupts, who pays, who is served, who is forgotten, and who apologizes for asking where they should sit. I kept Marion's table near the doors on my copy of the floor plan. Vanessa moved it when she sent the final version to the hotel. I discovered the change 3 days later and called Julian. He restored my layout without comment. That small act of professional neutrality felt more like loyalty than anything I had received from my family in years. As the celebration approached, Vanessa's posts became more elaborate. She photographed sample menus beside roses. She filmed herself choosing ribbon. She wrote about months of planning, though it had been 4 weeks, and most of those weeks had consisted of her sending me screenshots with arrows. My mother reposted everything. One caption read, "A daughter's love is in the details." Beneath it, my mother wrote, "No one knows my heart like Vanessa." I sat in my parked car outside the grocery store and looked at that sentence until the screen dimmed. No one knows my heart like Vanessa. I knew my mother took tea without sugar, but added honey when she had a cold. I knew she hated lilies because their smell reminded her of the hospital where her father died. I knew she worried about the skin on her hands and secretly bought expensive cream, then hid it from my father because she thought he would call it wasteful. I knew she always wanted the heel of a fresh loaf of bread, but pretended she did not. I had spent decades knowing her in the practical, unglamorous ways that keep a person comfortable. Vanessa knew which side of her face photographed better. Still, my mother's heart belonged publicly to her. I almost commented. I typed, "The white roses were chosen because they were in your wedding bouquet. I thought you'd like that." It was harmless, factual, almost sweet. My thumb hovered over post. Then I heard my mother's old voice from years ago. "Why do you always have to make things about recognition? Can't you do something from love without keeping score?" I deleted the comment. That was our family's most effective trick. Any request for fairness became proof that your love was impure. If you wanted acknowledgement, you were attention-seeking. If you wanted repayment, you were mercenary. If you wanted limits, you were cold. The only acceptable love was love that erased the giver. 2 weeks before the celebration, the estimated total crossed a number that made me sit back from my desk. I had paid less for my first car. I called Vanessa and asked her to contribute to the photographer and the added guests. There was a pause. "Why are you bringing this up now?" "Because the additions are yours." "I thought we were doing this together." "We are. That's why I'm asking you to cover part of it." Her voice sharpened. "I've put in hours." "So have I. But my time has value, Clara." The sentence hung between us. My time has value. I looked around my F-Fice at the contract binder, seating charts, vendor emails, and financial transfers I had made before breakfast. "So does mine." Vanessa laughed once without humor. "You're getting strange about this." Getting strange meant I had moved 1 inch away from the role she understood. She called our mother. 20 minutes later, Elaine phoned me in tears. "I cannot believe you are fighting with your sister over money before our anniversary." I asked her to pay for 2 things she added. She has 3 children. She has a full-time income and receives support from Mark. That is private. So is my bank account. My mother became quiet. Then she used the weapon that had ended every disagreement since childhood. "Your father does not need this stress." My father was healthy, gardening, and at that moment probably watching baseball. "But your father does not need this stress," transformed my request into a medical threat. I apologized. That evening, I transferred money from a savings account I had named Home. I had been putting money there for 4 years, hoping to purchase a small house with a garden. I told myself I was borrowing from it. I did not change the spreadsheet label. Home. There is a particular shame in taking money from the future you want to pay for people who do not notice your present. Sophie began visiting my office after school some afternoons because Vanessa had appointments nearby. She would sit at the small table by the window, do homework, and eat pastries from the bakery downstairs. She rarely asked for anything. Once, while I was checking invoices, she said, "Mom says she's exhausted from planning." I looked up. Sophie's expression was neutral, but her pencil had stopped moving. "She has done a lot of creative work," I said. "Did she pay for the flowers?" "No." "The music?" "No." "The hotel?" I hesitated. "No." Sophie nodded, as if confirming something. "She told Grandma she had to move money around." I felt a slow pressure behind my ribs. Maybe she meant time. Maybe. Then Sophie asked, "Why don't you tell them?" The honest answer was because I was afraid. Not afraid they would deny the facts. Afraid they would accept the facts and still choose Vanessa. I had survived by believing they did not see me because I was quiet. What if I spoke and learned they saw me perfectly and preferred the arrangement? Instead, I said, "Sometimes adults let things go to keep everyone happy." Sophie considered that. "Are you happy?" I did not answer. She returned to her homework, but the question remained between us like an open door. 3 days before the anniversary, I bought a dress. It was not red. Red had always made me feel as though I were borrowing someone else's courage. The dress I chose was deep green, the color of pine after rain, with long sleeves and a square neckline. It made my hazel eyes look brighter and my shoulders look strong. The saleswoman zipped it and said, "That color looks settled on you." Settled. Not dazzling, not dramatic, settled. I turned in front of the mirror and saw a woman who did not appear to be waiting for permission. I bought the dress and a pair of gold earrings shaped like leaves. The total was more than I usually spent on myself in 6 months. I nearly returned everything the next morning. Instead, I removed the tags. The night before the party, I could not sleep. I went to my office at 11, turned on the desk lamp, and opened a blank workbook. At first, I intended only to review the event cost one last time, but a number from Vanessa's call stayed in my head. My time has value. I created a new tab. I listed the anniversary, then Christmas dinners, Then my parents' flights, Vanessa's rental deposit, the dental bill, the soccer hotels, my father's transmission repair, my mother's kitchen appliances, gifts purchased from mom and dad when they had forgotten birthdays, groceries delivered during Vanessa's divorce, school tuition gaps, emergency vet bills, family vacations I had partially funded but had slept through on couches because the children needed the bedrooms. I searched old statements and emails. I built 10 years of quiet sacrifice into columns. The total was not the price of a house. It was the down payment on one, plus several years of mortgage payments. I stared at the screen until the numbers lost shape. Then I added another column called Acknowledged. I typed 0. Not because no one had ever said thank you. They had. My mother thanked me the way one thanks an app for confirming a payment. Vanessa sometimes sent a heart emoji. My father once said, "We knew you'd sort it out." Gratitude existed, but acknowledgement did not. No one had allowed the giving to change the way they valued me. I had spent years confusing usefulness with intimacy. They trusted me with emergencies, but not with tenderness. They trusted my card, my calendar, my judgment, my labor. They did not trust my feelings because feelings might require them to give something back. The arithmetic was brutal in its simplicity. Every time I rescued them, I removed the consequence that might have forced them to grow. Every time I accepted invisibility, I made invisibility efficient. I was not merely a victim of the system. I was the system's most reliable employee. That realization hurt more than the total. At 1 a.m, Aunt Marion called. She often slept poorly because of her hip, but she had never called so late. "Clara," she said, "your mother told me you moved my table back by the door." I moved it near the interior doors, away from the terrace steps. She said Vanessa corrected it. I closed my eyes. I corrected Vanessa's correction. Marion gave a dry little laugh. "Good." We were quiet. Then she said, "I watched your grandmother do this to your mother and me." I sat straighter. "Do what?" "Choose one daughter to display and one daughter to depend on. Your mother was the display, I was the dependence. She got dance lessons. I got the house key. She wore white gloves to church. I came home early to put supper in the oven. Everyone called me strong, which meant no one came when I was tired." I had never heard this story. Did it ever change? No, her answer was immediate. I changed, much later than I should have. "What did you do?" I stopped volunteering for punishment and calling it devotion. Outside my office window, the florist's sign moved slightly in the wind. Marion continued, "The family will tell you that refusing to carry them is the same as dropping them. It is not. They are standing on the ground. They just prefer your back." I looked at the glowing total on my screen. What if they hate me? My dear, people who benefit from your lack of boundaries often experience your boundaries as betrayal. I wrote that sentence on a sticky note. Before we ended the call, she said, "Tomorrow, eat before everyone asks whether you have earned the right." I laughed softly. "I will." I believed I meant it. The Bellwether Conservatory was breathtaking that evening. White roses climbed the brass arch behind my parents' table. Candlelight reflected in the windows, turning the dark river beyond them into moving black glass. The quartet played near the terrace doors. Each menu card bore my parents' initials in gold. Along one wall, I had arranged photographs from 35 years of marriage. My father in a borrowed tuxedo, my mother laughing beneath a veil, camping trips, graduations, birthdays, grandchildren, hospital recoveries, ordinary Sundays. I had included photographs in which I was present, but Vanessa removed several during setup because she said the wall looked crowded. When I arrived, I found 5 large images of her and one small family photograph in which my face was partly hidden behind a centerpiece. For a moment, I considered putting them back. Then Julian approached with the final timing sheet, and I let it go. "Everything is ready," he said. His eyes moved to my dress. "You look wonderful." The compliment was so direct and uncomplicated that I nearly looked behind me. "Thank you." He lowered his voice. "Your aunt's table is where you requested." I followed his glance. Marion's chair had a clear path, a firm cushion, and a small vase of white roses. I felt sudden tears and blinked them away. "You remembered." It was in the contract. In the contract. Again, the comfort of a world where written things mattered. Guests arrived. Vanessa positioned herself near the entrance and accepted praise with both hands. "This is extraordinary," one woman said. Vanessa touched her chest. "We wanted to honor them properly." "We." My mother arrived in pale blue and cried when she saw the roses. She turned immediately to Vanessa and embraced her. "You remembered," she said. Vanessa held her tightly. "Of course I did." I was 6 feet away, holding the emergency, sewing kit my mother had asked me to bring. My father shook my hand. "Good turnout." That was all. During cocktails, I moved through the room checking on servers, helping Marion settle, finding my father's reading glasses, replacing a menu damaged by spilled wine, and directing late guests to the coat room. Vanessa circulated with the photographer. Each time the camera turned toward the family, someone handed me a purse, a wrap, a phone, or a glass to hold. At one point, I had 4 handbags on my arm. Sophie came beside me and quietly took 2. "You don't have to," I said. "I know." We stood together near the wall, while the photographer arranged my parents, Vanessa, and her sons beneath the floral arch. "Clara," my mother called without looking at me, "make sure Marion's walker isn't in the picture." I moved the walker. The photographer took 12 shots. No one invited me into the frame. A server offered me champagne. I declined because I was afraid I might spill something while carrying one else's belongings. The toasts began at 7:30. My father spoke first. He thanked my mother for 35 years of patience and thanked the guests for sharing the evening. Then my mother stood and spoke about family. She said marriage was built by people who showed up when things became difficult. She thanked Vanessa for pouring her heart into every detail. The room applauded. Vanessa stood next. She had prepared remarks. I knew because I had printed them when her home printer ran out of ink. "When I decided we needed to celebrate Mom and Dad," she began, "I wanted the evening to feel like them, beautiful, generous, and full of love." She gestured toward the room I had booked. "I chose the roses because they have always been Mom's flower. I chose the music because Dad loves the old standards. I wanted every person here to feel what I feel when I look at our family. Her voice trembled at exactly the right places. She was very good at emotion when emotion had an audience. My mother cried. My father placed a hand over his heart. Guests applauded again. Then Vanessa raised her glass. To the people who taught me that family is the greatest investment we ever make. Investment. The word landed almost comically. Across the room, Sophie looked at me. Aunt Marion did too. I did not applaud. I held my glass and felt something inside me become quiet, not numb, not broken. Quiet the way a courtroom becomes quiet before a verdict. Dinner was served buffet style because my father disliked formal plated courses. The arrangement had been my idea: roasted beef, herb potatoes, green beans, rolls, and a lemon tort based on the cake from my parents' wedding. I had not eaten since breakfast. All evening, servers had asked if I wanted a plate, and I had said later. After the toasts, guests moved toward the buffet. I waited until most of the older people had gone through. Then I picked up a plate. I chose a small portion of potatoes and reached toward the beef. My mother's hand closed lightly around my wrist. The room did not stop all at once. It narrowed. "Clara," she said, still smiling because several people were nearby. "Let the family finish first." I looked at her. "I am family." She gave a tiny, embarrassed laugh. "You know what I mean. You've been running around with the staff all evening. They can make you something in the kitchen." The server holding the carving knife froze. I heard Vanessa behind us say, "Mom, she's fine." For one hopeful second, I thought she was defending me. Then she added, "Clara doesn't care about food. She's happiest when she's useful." A couple of guests smiled awkwardly. My mother released my wrist and lowered her voice. "Please do not create a moment. This dinner cost too much for drama." This dinner cost too much. I looked at the plate in my hand. The gold initials on the menu cards, the white roses, the champagne, the quartet, the photograph wall, my parents glowing in borrowed grandeur, Vanessa holding court beneath the arch, 58 people eating from a table funded by the savings account labeled home. Something old rose in me. The child at Christmas watching her bracelet clasp around someone else's wrist. The young woman sleeping on a couch during the vacation she helped pay for. The daughter who had spent years being praised for needing nothing. Then something older than fear answered. "No more." I set the plate down on the buffet table. Gently, the porcelain made almost no sound. My mother mistook quiet for surrender. She touched my arm. "That's my sensible girl." Sensible girl. At 36, I finally heard what those words had always meant. The daughter whose pain could be postponed indefinitely. I turned away. Vanessa followed me toward the corridor before I reached the door. "What are you doing?" "Leaving." Her smile remained fixed for the people watching from the room. "Don't be ridiculous." "I'm tired." "It's almost time for the anniversary video. You have to manage the projector." "Julian knows how." Her eyes sharpened. "Clara, do not punish Mom because you're feeling invisible." That sentence stopped me. Not because it was cruel, because it was accurate in a way Vanessa did not intend. She knew I was invisible. She knew. She had always known. "You noticed," I said. She blinked. What? You noticed I was invisible. That's not what I said. You knew enough to use the word. Her expression changed. For 1 second, the polished surface cracked and something frightened appeared beneath it. This is not the time. It has never been the time. Tomorrow, then. We'll talk tomorrow. We won't. She reached for my arm. I stepped back. Clara, she whispered, you cannot leave me to handle all of this. There it was, not I'm sorry. Not you belong here, not you should eat. You cannot leave me to handle all of this. I looked through the doorway at the room. Without me, Vanessa would have to speak to staff. Manage the video, settle the invoice, find transportation for our parents, check the gifts, and solve the dozens of invisible problems she called details. She was not afraid I would leave the family. She was afraid I would leave the work. I think you'll find a way, I said. I walked into the corridor. Julian was near the front desk reviewing something on a tablet. When he saw me, his professional expression shifted. Ms. Bennett, I need to change the payment instructions. He did not ask why. We stepped into a small office beside the lobby. I removed my card from my purse and placed it on the desk between us, then immediately took it back. I did not need to hand it over. It was already on file. I want my card released from the remaining balance, I said. The deposit can remain paid. I will not dispute it, but I will not authorize the final charges. Julian's gaze held mine. Under the agreement, you may revoke authorization before closing. The outstanding amount will need to be settled by the event party before departure. Yes. Would you like the invoice presented privately? I thought of my mother's hand around my wrist, Vanessa's toast, the phrase investment. No, I said. Present it at the table. Ask Elaine Bennett or Vanessa Cole to choose the payment method. He nodded once. Would you like me to identify you as the original contracting party? Yes. My voice did not shake. Julian removed the authorization note from the account, printed the current balance, and placed it in a black folder. As he turned to leave, he paused. For what it is worth, everyone on my staff knows who organized this evening. The words almost undid me. Thank you. I put on my coat over the green dress and walked outside. The night air near the river was cold enough to make me inhale sharply. I stood beneath the hotel awning and waited for guilt. It came, but not as powerfully as I expected. It arrived as a habit, a rehearsed accusation. You have embarrassed them. You have ruined the night. You are selfish. You will be alone. I listened. Then I asked the guilt one question I had never asked before. Why is their comfort always purchased with my humiliation? The guilt had no answer. I reached my car and sat behind the wheel. Through the tall conservatory windows, I could see shapes moving beneath chandeliers. A man raised a glass. Someone laughed. The quartet continued playing. My phone rang. Vanessa. I let it ring. Then my mother. Then Vanessa again. A message appeared. What did you do? Another. They brought us a bill. Another. Call me now. I placed the phone face down. Later, Aunt Marion told me exactly what happened. Julian entered during dessert carrying the black folder. He approached the head table while Vanessa was introducing the anniversary video. He waited until she finished speaking, then leaned toward my mother and said, "Mrs. Bennett, the contracting party has withdrawn authorization for the remaining event balance. We will need an alternative payment method before the evening concludes." My mother stared at him. "What contracting party?" Julian opened the folder. Clara Bennett. According to Marion, the room seemed to change temperature. Vanessa snatched the invoice first. She read the total and said, "This cannot be right." Julian explained each category: additional guests, terrace service, floral upgrade, photography, quartet, champagne wall, custom favors, service charges, taxes. Every beautiful choice Vanessa had made appeared beside a number. My father asked, "Clara was paying for all of this." Julian replied, "Ms. Bennett paid the deposit and authorized the event until approximately 10 minutes ago." My mother said she wouldn't do this. Marion, from her accessible table near the doors, answered loudly enough for several guests to hear. She just did. No one had planned for the dependable person to stop. That is the weakness in every family system built on one person's self-erasure. It appears stable only because no one calculates the load-bearing capacity of the person underneath it. Vanessa tried 3 cards. One declined because of the transaction size. One was flagged for fraud. The third covered part of the balance. My parents paid the rest from an emergency account my father had once told me was not to be touched except in a real crisis. My absence qualified as a crisis. Guests pretended not to notice, but everyone noticed. They had spent the evening praising Vanessa's generosity. Now they watched her argue over charges she had personally requested. The photographer, who had already been paid from my deposit, continued packing equipment in silence. My father asked where I had gone. No one knew. That question mattered to me more than it should have. For once, they had to notice the exact shape of the space I left behind. I was still in the parking lot when a message arrived from Sophie. "Aunt Clara, are you okay?" I pick. D up the phone. "I'm safe," I wrote. "Are you?" "Yes, Mom is mad. Grandma is crying." I stared at the words, feeling the old impulse to return, to repair the room, comfort my mother, rescue Vanessa from public consequence. Then another message came. "I saw what happened at the buffet. You didn't do anything wrong." My throat tightened. Sophie continued. "Mom says you ruined everything, but I think they only noticed you after you left." I read that sentence 4 times. They only noticed you after you left. A 13-year-old had summarized my entire life. I wrote back, "You should not be in the middle of this. None of it is your responsibility." She replied, "I know. You always tell me that. You should tell yourself." I laughed and cried at the same time, quietly in my car. Then I drove home. The calls continued until after midnight. My mother left 3 voicemails, moving through fury, injury, and disbelief. "I don't know why you would do this to us," she said. "After everything we've done for you." For most of my life, that sentence had ended every argument. It turned childhood into a debt I could never repay. That night, it sounded different. Raising a daughter did not entitle anyone to employ her forever. I did not return the calls. The next morning, my father came alone. I opened my laptop and showed him the event summary. Deposit, food, flowers, music, photography, additional guests, champagne, taxes, and service charges. His face changed as he read. You were paying for all of this? Yes. I thought you were helping. This is what helping has meant in our family. Why didn't you tell me? I tried. Mom cried, Vanessa called me jealous, and you asked me to keep the peace. He looked away. Walking out was still extreme. Then we disagree. The surprise on his face showed how rarely I had allowed disagreement to remain unresolved. I had always explained until everyone understood I was good. That morning, I let him leave thinking I was difficult. My mother emailed that I had turned love into a transaction. Vanessa wrote that money would not comfort me when I had no family left. The sentence hurt because losing them had been the fear beneath every payment I made. But sitting in my quiet kitchen, I realized I had already been alone in most family rooms. I had simply been too busy serving everyone to notice. I answered that I would no longer fund family expenses or manage family emergencies by default. I needed distance. For months, I learned how much of my life had been built around anticipation. I anticipated my mother's needs, my father's repairs, Vanessa's emergencies, the holidays no one else planned. When I stopped, whole evenings appeared. At first, the empty time frightened me. Then it began to feel like ownership. My father tested the boundary by asking me to organize his medical bills. I sent him the number of a professional service. They charge, he replied. Yes, I wrote. That word felt larger than the hotel invoice. I reopened the savings account labeled home. A year later, I bought a small brick house with a narrow garden and an old pear tree. Holding the keys, I understood that money could build a future when it was no longer being used to purchase permission to belong. My father slowly changed. He began calling without asking for anything. Once, when my mother said I had abandoned the family, he answered, "We leaned on her too much." My mother took longer. Nearly a year after the party, she said, "What I said at the buffet was cruel." Yes. I was embarrassed because you were moving around like staff. I was moving around because no one else was helping. I know that now. She asked whether we could start again. We can start from here, I said, but we cannot pretend here has no history. She cried. I did not change the sentence. Vanessa and I remained no contact for almost 2 years. Then she wrote, I told myself you didn't care about acknowledgement. I needed that to be true because I didn't know who I was if I wasn't the daughter everyone admired. It did not erase the harm, but it was honest. We are not close now. Sometimes she sends a birthday card. Sometimes she pays her share before anyone asks. Change in families like ours rarely arrives as a perfect apology. Sophie remained the clearest proof that leaving mattered. She helped me plant lavender beside the back fence. One afternoon, she told me she had quit a school committee because the other students gave her all the work and took the credit. My teacher said they needed me, she said. What did you tell her? That being needed is not the same as being respected. 2 years after the anniversary, I invited Sophie, Aunt Marion, my father, and 2 friends to dinner. I cooked roast chicken and a lemon tart. There were no chandeliers and no photographer, only a wooden table beside the window and people who knew who had prepared the meal. Sophie cut the tart and handed me the first pie. "Yes." "For the host," she said. Aunt Marion raised her glass. To Clara, who finally stopped volunteering to disappear. My father repeated my name. I took a bite before serving anyone else. Freedom is not always a dramatic exit. Sometimes it is eating while the food is warm. It is letting the phone ring, keeping the money you earned, and allowing someone to be disappointed without making their disappointment your emergency. It is refusing to buy a chair in a room where your labor is welcome, but your presence is not. I still own the green dress. I wear it every year on the anniversary of the night I left the Bellwether Hotel. Not because I celebrate humiliating anyone, but because that was the night I learned dignity can be quiet. Sometimes it looks like a woman changing one payment instruction and choosing not to return to a room that only noticed her after she stopped serving it. I did not destroy my family. I stopped financing the version of it that required me to disappear. There is a difference. Share this story with someone who has spent years carrying people who refuse to see the weight. Tell me in the comments when you realized that being needed was not the same as being loved. Subscribe to After Silence stories for more hidden truths, quiet reckonings, and women who finally choose themselves. I'll see you in the next episode.